I want to welcome everyone back to the Greater Rochester Teen Book Festival in the year 2021. We made it. I'm Stephanie. I use they pronouns. I'm one of the volunteers for this panel, A Day in the Life, How Real World Experiences Shaped My Writing. And before I introduce our authors, I just want to remind everyone, if you have a question for any of our authors, please write it in the chat. Please keep yourself muted for this session, and we are being recorded. And now to introduce who you came here to see. Morgan Baden has ghostwritten several bestsellers before co-writing her debut novel, The Hive, with her husband, Barry Liga. As someone with 15 years of experience in corporate and internal communications, social media, and storytelling, along with being the biggest fan of the Babysitters Club and holding a wide collection of YA novels and magazines from the 80s and 90s, she has a host of experience to share through her writing in this panel. Rocky Callen, with her debut novel, A Breath Too Late, has advocated and told stories through her experiences since a very young age. With experiences like interning for NASA before the age of 14 and owning 2 pet raccoons, she's known for speaking out on behalf of marginalized communities, from undocumented immigrants to those struggling with mental health, adding wonderful insight to this topic. Finally, Ellen Hopkins is a poet, freelance writer, and award-winning author of a vast array of books and articles on many topics. As mentor and board member for the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, as well as a speaker at various events, schools, and festivals like this one, visiting every state in the country and many places abroad, as you just heard, she also brings a vast amount of experience about writing and how that experience shapes it to this panel. Authors, did you want to get started?
Sure. Yes, thank you.
So one of the questions that I have prepared for you, do you ever find writing can become difficult because the current culture changes so frequently?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you are someone who uses a lot of pop culture references in your work, there's always a risk there, right? Of seeming outdated almost immediately. Especially, we all know publishing is a slow business. So you can write a book and it doesn't hit bookshelves until 4 or 5 years later sometimes, if not longer. So that's always something to keep in mind. I will say with The Hive, this is a tale about social media gone wrong, essentially. And one of the things we made sure to do was to create our own social media network that is used in the book, rather than making it a Facebook or an Instagram or something like that. We reference some of the other popular platforms occasionally, but creating something new really allowed us to make sure that we weren't risking the book feeling way out of date in a year or two, hoping that eventually Facebook is broken up and all the big tech is broken up. So, so fingers crossed on that. But I think even when it comes to things like musical references or TV references, you just have to be really aware of what you're talking about to make sure that it feels modern for whoever's reading it.
Yeah, I was saying when I first got here, see, Crank published 2004, so we were just kind of moving into the social media space, and it was all MySpace. That was it. There was no even Facebook at that point. I mean, it might have been out there, but nobody had heard of it yet. But so it's important to remember that those things can become dated, but also they can help set you in a certain time as well. So it depends on what the goal of your book is. It was funny because we've been talking about somewhere that now the 1990s are considered historical fiction, like, right? So it's like 1990s, what? And then I'm like, well, I guess so. But I'm going like, I would never write historical fiction. And I go, you know what, except for I should write a book set in the 70s because I lived that, as a teenager living that. And it was an interesting landscape. So it might be a good historical fiction. But yeah, I think social media stuff, especially because who knows if, like we had this discussion earlier, I think like YouTube will be around for a long time, and a lot of people are kind of getting their start there, and I think will continue to. But who knows if Instagram will still be a thing in 15 years, or TikTok probably will, because it's kind of crazy. But so all that stuff is, yeah, it's important to remember, but also your readers are gonna, they'll go with you.
I think that readers can be so gracious, so generous with the leeway they give us, because like Morgan was saying, we write a book and then a couple of years later is when it comes out. So like all of your pop culture references may feel like they're not as current as you'd like them to be. But the other thing too about, changing culture, I think especially right now, I feel like we're really taking a lot of quantum leaps in terms of our collective narratives and how we see certain issues and how we approach certain issues. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of value in that. And so I know all the authors that I'm connected with, we're always trying to evolve and learn from, people on the forefront, including teens. And, Ellen put it really well in an earlier panel about how, often we need to sit back and listen and observe what's going on around us, so that way we can capture it on the page. You're on mute. There you go.
Jumping off of that, does our current culture ever help you with a current book, either inspire or help you choose what to write about?
Of course. I mean, it's like, because it's around us all the time, right? So it's, and especially if you have kids in your house, you're listening to what's important to kids, because the conversations are going on all the time. And I'm a nosy parent. I mean, I use them all the time just to make sure it's all cool, you know what I mean? But I learn things from the kids in my life. And again, that's why I'm missing school visits so much, because I love being out and among young people and listening and paying attention to them, letting them tell me their stories instead of me always trying to tell them my stories. I think that part of it's really, really important. It's huge, because we want to write what they want to read, right?
I have long believed that teenage girls will save the world. And I think we always see that reflected in books. And I welcome any interaction I have with younger readers, whether it's, through a workshop I'm hosting or teaching or whatever, or just like eavesdropping on the subway. Like when I see a group of kids with a backpack, I'm like, I'm going to sit next to them. I am taking out my AirPods. I want to hear not even just what they're talking about, but the words they're using and how they're doing it, and their body language. I don't want this to sound creepy, and I realize it just started to sound creepy, but it's very, like, I think to be a writer, you have to be observant. And so I'm just observing a lot, especially whether it's a big culture moment or a little culture moment or something that we're not sure is going to have a long-term effect on culture, but it might. I don't know. I think most writers are just always right there with their ear to the ground, paying attention to things.
Yes. And I remember, Ellen and I were talking about how, everyone experiences like these teenage years, right? But the pressures on teenagers right now are compounded in so many ways. And it's really important for us to get, by listening, the nuances of that experience. And, they are the trendsetters. They're the ones emerging. They're the ones creating the culture around us. And so we have to be very, very humbly sit back and observe, like Morgan's talking about. I feel like, especially when we're looking at not only our own experiences and what's shaping our own experiences, but when we're looking at the world view, so much happens day to day, year to year, that are big and that really do shift and change things, on a global way. We saw the pandemic and how it really just shifted all of life, right? In just a few weeks' time, everything we knew as normal changed. and people's normals are disrupted all the time and are changing all the time. And I find it really inspiring, because what starts at a book, right, is an inciting incident. Something changes for the character that catapults them into some new way of thinking or reality or experience. And so tugging on inspiration from all around us is so necessary. And there's so much to be inspired by for our writing.
You know, it's interesting too, because some of this is universal. Like, we were on this little tiny, we're in a little village in Austria, like a little tiny village, right? And so we were on a bus trying to get someplace, and it happened to be the time when school got out. So all these kids got on this bus with us, and they're speaking German or whatever, not speaking English, but they're on their phones and they're laughing. And so the things that they are doing in Austria when they get on the school bus is the same thing as they do here, which it's really interesting. I wish I spoke German so I knew what they were talking about. Probably us, you know, those funny tourists, but you know, it was pretty great. But I do think there are things that are universal to teen experience or to human experiences. So when you talk about and I talk about global stuff a lot, because there are all these people that are, you know, today it's all about America first and all this, and it's like, but we live on a globe, and so we have to remember that the things that we do here in this country affect what happens in the world. And I think it's also good for young people to realize that.
When I interned at NASA, what I was actually particularly focused on was weather disruptions and El Nino, which is the warming of water side of the coast of Ecuador, Peru, all that. But they were talking about La Nina, which is another way, but it's all about disruption. Is that like the heating of that water on that particular part of the world would then disrupt the jet streams and the weather patterns all over the world. And so we have to understand that, like, our actions have consequences beyond what we could ever see. And I think that's one of the big exciting things about writing, is sometimes we can show that. And we're all connected. And I think it's really important to know we're not alone in our own experiences, no matter how alone we may feel in them, but also that, you know, we can lean on those connections and build those bridges of connections when we need them most.
And I think that's what's so great about writing YA in particular, is as the writer, you're uncovering those connections and whatnot, but you're writing about a time of life for most people for whom that is the journey, right? They are uncovering who they are, how they're connected to people, what matters to them, and their own El Niños, right? So like what I'm doing as a 14-year-old making this choice has repercussions. And so it's so fascinating to go on that journey with a character and to figure out what makes them sit up and take notice of how they themselves impact the world around them. And so that's the universality that I love too about writing, particularly for young adults.
Absolutely.
So this might be a quicker conversation. Do you have a favorite term in our current culture? Like a favorite phrase or word?
Yeah, again.
Okay, you go first. Maybe that'll spark something.
Okay, mine is more less the particular phrase and more the sentence structure of the phrase, which is, it's the blank for me, which you see a lot on social. So like, you know, someone posted something funny and you're like, it's the confidence for me, or it's the humbleness for me, or whatever. And that, for some reason, that one makes me laugh so much. Partly because I think people use it in really incredible ways that like nail down the essence of something. And partly just because it's one of those, like, it's a trendy phrase that I'm sure in 6 months is going to feel dated if someone does it like on an Instagram comment. But right now it cracks me up every time I see it.
Mine's not a phrase. I mean, there's a lot of things that make me giggle, especially Spanish phrases. so my husband sort of is like on, you know, has his For You page, and it's mostly all in Spanish, and mine is like a mixture, but he gets stuff that are so hilarious and that I'm learning from. But I resisted, this is not a phrase, this is just like something that has emerged that I resisted, was TikTok. I did not get on for a long time, and my husband's like, you gotta get on, you gotta do it, you have to do it, and you have to make videos on it. I was like, oh my gosh. And I finally did, and it really is so awesome. Like, one of the things, like, here we can see like windows into people's rooms or into people's lives, and it's so much content, and yet somehow you get pulled these pieces that are right for you, and you connect with people. And so I'm always blown away by the power of social media and how it evolves. And so for right now, that is something that has like captured my attention. And so many things. I do love, Morgan, that line too. I think another thing that I really love, and this is more general as well, is the emergence of this claiming confidence in young people. I grew up, and it was like humility and like playing down who you are, and really playing small in a lot of ways was sort of the thing that people did. And now I just see so many young people claiming, like, being proud of who they are, loving who they are, being seen for who they are, instead of hiding it. And it's the most beautiful thing, absolutely gorgeous thing. And I feel so grateful that my kids get to grow up behind these teenagers creating that now. It's just awesome. It's just awesome. And again, that's very general thing, but it's phenomenal.
That literally makes me like tear up thinking about, you're right. Like, especially teenage girls now, we're like, please take up space.
Yeah.
Like, we were told not to.
With your body, with your language, with your voice, with, everything. Like, claiming who you are is so powerful. And for a long time, it really didn't feel like teens had that. Like, and it was like we were like clawing for little bits and pieces. Whereas now I feel like they're really on the forefront, creating the narrative for the rest of us to follow. Like, what have you guys been doing? Like, what's up? Like, this is how it should be done. And I so respect it. I so respect it, because I know it takes bravery and vulnerability and courage. And also it creates a new norm, like, way to be disruptive for the absolute best reason, so that other people don't have to push that fight.
Well, I think we've learned a lot, and especially this last little bit, which was everything was so interior, and we were all, drawn into this space, that we've learned a lot about ourselves as well as other people. Like, this brought out the good and the bad in a lot of people. And so we've learned who our real friends are and who maybe we need to look out for. And it's been interesting. And that's even within our own families and etc. Also this kind of backward movement that we've currently hit, this kind of like, oh, we didn't come quite as far as we thought we had, I guess. But the thing about it is, we have empowered enough young people to keep pushing back. And that's what's really important. And I think also that's what YA can do, is to empower young people with the idea of using their voice for good or bad, but mostly for good, which is why I think it's important to use our platforms when we can, when there's something important to talk about. We can get in trouble doing that. But I've been getting in trouble for saying too much my entire life. So.
And that's why we love you, Ellen.
So we've been mentioning the pandemic. Do any of you think that it will make its way into YA Lit, or do you think authors will avoid it?
Up to a point, I think it has to. I mean, but it's interesting, because as we were writing in that space, like I know I went to my editor going, because I have Little League in this middle grade coming out, right? And it's like, so is Little League going to look different? And it did for a while, but it's not, it's going back the other way, right? So it's going to be like regular Little League. And that's what she said. The whole goal is to like get everything back to normal. I think there will be references. I think there'll have to be, because again, most of us didn't even know what a freaking pandemic was. I mean, we had some idea, but we didn't really know how it would affect us personally. So I think there will be references. There'll have to be.
I know when I was writing during the pandemic, and everything is kind of like, I feel like I was on a panel earlier that sometimes we need some years from the experience to be able to properly process it. And then you'll probably see a bunch of those books emerge because it won't feel so fresh and so raw. But some people I have seen book announcements that are set during the pandemic. But I think that every season of our life like sort of requires something different for each of us individually as writers, but for the collective. So I had written really sad, dark book, and my editor was like, this is probably not the time for this book right now. And in terms of like for my next book, and it was because like people were talking about people want more escape books. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, you know, depending on who your team is that some people will operate like it never happened, totally cool, and other people will have it be a focal point. And I think we'll need all of those books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. I know as a reader, my reading tastes changed immensely over the past year. And it's true. I was suddenly like, I don't want your dark, I love a good dark book. I was like, I don't have the space for that right now. So I absolutely gravitated towards a lighter fare. Still super important. But like, I let's just say I put down a lot of books that I had picked up thinking I would love them. And writing wise, yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be some that reflect the pandemic, some that don't. I'm working on a YA right now that, to be honest, I didn't even consider putting pandemic references in it. Probably, again, just because that's where my head is like, I just don't have the space to write about that right now because I'm still living it. But I think the point is that there will have to be all of those books because readers are going to need and demand all of those different angles on it.
Well, one day 2021 is going to be historical fiction too, so.
Oh, Stephanie, I think you're muted again.
Jumping off of that, which would you say inspires your writing more, larger world events or smaller everyday experiences?
Both. I don't know about more. I mean, I think it depends on what the book is and what the book's covering. Like I've been revising this book for a while, a near future YA, and it's very much politically driven. It's very much about what this country could look like if, let's say, if January 6th worked, okay? I'll put it that way. So it's like, where would we be if we were in that space? And that's kind of what this is, highly politically charged. Then I just turned in this YA it's all about the day-to-day. I mean, a middle grade that's all about how much the small experiences matter. We talked a little bit about in another panel about the meaning of mundane, what mundane means. And part of that is, that's the everyday, and it's part of everybody's life. Even if we're living the big stuff, we still have to go to the bathroom. We still have to, go to the refrigerator, and we still have to do all those things that we have to do. So I think it's both.
Yeah, I would say certainly both. But I do think most of mine is the small everyday experiences, partly because they're universal and partly because, I don't know, I find a lot of inspiration and a lot of learning in those incremental moments. I'm going to mute because my son is crying. Bear with me.
I find that I am drawn to both, absolutely, but more in terms of the like collective experiences. So maybe something that doesn't appear as like on the global, like on a news network, but statistics really impact me, and I want to humanize those statistics, and that translates into the day to day. So breath deals with domestic violence, it deals with depression, and I know the statistics, the devastating statistics around that and suicide. And so bringing that a number into something that feels real and feels honest, and so that it may not be everyone's day-to-day experience, but it is many people's experience, and just like opening a window to that. And so I find like finding the humanity in things is what inspires me the most, because I want it so that people can understand and offer love and understanding and compassion to other people that they may not otherwise understand.
That's what I think the power of books really is. It's not just, yes, it's important for kids to see themselves in books, but it's really, really important for kids to see somebody else in books and to gain some understanding of somebody that's not like them. That's why I think we need Own Voices books out there, and not just for the kids that they speak to very specifically, but for the other kids who might not ever get a glimpse of what it's like to live in inner city Chicago or you know, Ecuador or wherever, you know. It's like, and again, it's because the universal is it's what it means to be human. It's not what it means to be a Nevadan or or you know, a Renoite or whatever. It's like it's this big universal space. So we all need to be able to look at other people's experiences and see, you know, how they can how we can affect them and how they can affect us. I got my kids like, "Can I go play?" I'm like, "Could you just wait till I get out?"
Yeah.
All right, so I got a question here, and I'm just going to read it exactly because I can't remember it. How do you think experiences of friends and family members that you have heard of secondhand affect storytelling?
I think that if I'm understanding the question correctly, when we look at any experience, we're looking at it from a very specific point of view, and we can think that that is absolute truth, right? And yet someone else can look at that same experience and be, you know, adjacent in some way and feel or experience that completely differently. And so when I'm thinking of extended family or and how people and how that influences our storytelling, I'm thinking of how often we can create villains out of just other messy humans, and to humanize them is very important. And I think that when we write, being able to, in our stories, no matter who the character is, even if they're a bystander character, even if they're the most harmful character, is to identify that they have a collective, like a collection of experiences that have shaped them that way. And that's true for us and our families, right? Like we have generations of collections of experiences that have then, you know, zoomed down to who we have become. You know, we are inheriting all of that. And then we also get to choose, do we want to continue to hand those things down? And sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. I know there's plenty in my own family that I choose to be the disruptor of. But to be able to look at other people's experiences and recognize that they're their own, even if you agree or don't agree with them.
I mean, family is like, whether you have one or not, family is important, right? So if you don't have one, you're wanting to have one, you know what I mean? And if you do have one, a lot of times you're like, I don't want this like, not today anyway. So, but humanity is about relationships, right? So it's whether how you relate to friends, how you relate to your pets, how you relate. I always tell, because we talk about being observers as writers, I always tell people they should go to airports and sit there and just watch people. Like, how does the kid that's crying going through security, like, does that dad yank that kid through there, or does that dad pick him up and carry him through? You know what I mean? That's how you look at like character building, like how those characters relate to their families, their kids, their boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever, their pets, all those things. They tell you a lot. Those kind of things, you don't have to say that's a bad guy if you see the guy yanking his kid through security, right? You know. So those things that are a part of all of us, and our families are like my family's insane, insane, but I love them most of the time. There are times, but you know, they've inspired characters, their family members everywhere, like that have inspired pieces at least of characters that I'm writing like all the time. And it's because they're in your life. And so, you know, you observe them, and does that part of that person, is that something that you would want to embody or not? And so those are just like conscious decisions you make as a writer, what you put into those characters. But sure, good and bad have come from my family, that's for sure.
And I think there's elements in every person we come across, or every story we hear, or every friend of a friend who has a wild tale to tell. I don't know, there's the sort of, Ellen talked before about the universality of experiences and of people and what we go, and of the world and our connection. And I think when we drill down to the individual, what I'm looking for is always, well, what is that commonality between us or amongst us, right? And so when I think about, you know, real world people, or real observances I've had at airports, or family stories, or family legends, or things like that, yeah, it's always, I mean, that's part of the pleasure of being a writer, right? Is that you're able to take what you need to from those kinds of stories or moments, and then build something fresh out of it that hopefully still reflects the original meaning or the original moment, but has some kind of element added to it that makes it your unique element, right? Or your unique voice.
So jumping off the airport comment, what is the weirdest place you have found inspiration?
So many places.
I have a very particular moment when I was in high school, where I guess we were in the locker room, and another girl in my school was putting on mascara. And you know how when you put on mascara, you're like, open your mouth. It's like an automatic thing, like your mouth falls open into a circle. So she was putting it on, and she started talking about how she cannot close her mouth when she puts on mascara. A stupid throwaway conversation. I am 41 years old, so that was, you know, a 25-year ago conversation. I think of it every morning when I put on mascara. And I took that scene and put it in a book of mine too. Obviously the circumstances are slightly different, but it is two characters having a conversation about their mascara in one in the locker room. And again, a very stupid throwaway conversation. I don't know why. There must have been some weird chemical thing happening in my brain that made it stick out so much, because here I am decades later still talking about it. So I would say that's probably the weirdest inspiration I've taken, is this throwaway mascara moment that made its way into a book of mine.
I guess I was at a book signing one time, and it was funny too, because for whatever reason, I know why, because so Burned had come out, and Burned has an LDS thread in there. And so all my books were banned in parts of Idaho, but not in Boise. So I had this book signing in Boise, and they came from this, it was like overflowing out the doors book signing, right? And so this one couple, and so all these people, and I'm talking, and so there's this one couple, and they're leaning up against a post kind of in the middle of the store, and he kept bugging her and she kept bugging him. You could tell they loved each other like a lot, not because they were smooching or whatever, just because of the way they were interacting with each other. And so I noticed them, and then they came up at they waited till the end, so that was a long book signing, like, an hour and a half signing books or whatever. They waited till the very end, and they came up and they knelt down in front of the table in front of me like that. And they go, "Can we tell you our story?" And I'm like, "Well, sure." And their story was that when they got together, so she was Mormon, he was Catholic, and when they got together, her mom, and they wouldn't break up, her mom put her in a mental institution for 2 years until she turned 18, and then she got out. The minute she got out, boom, there they were back together again. But they inspired Eden in my book Tricks. So yeah.
That's so awesome. So man, there's so many inspirations. Like there's little like mundane things, right? Like the whole mascara thing, right? I just remember like, when you're in the bathroom and then somebody's walking in and there's like the horror of like somebody walking in on you in the bathroom. But how I just remember that's something. I feel like that's universal. But I remember like all those little moments, like those little embarrassments, like trying to play it cool, but realize like the book that you're reading is upside down, and somebody catching you. Like all those little things, like they find their ways into books. With like one thing is I met my husband when I was 16. I was going into college. And I always think about, because so often we sort of, we talk about love, and we talk about like for teenagers and everything. For us, like we're married now and we've been together for 18 years or so. And I remember like him, we were the trope of like the good girl and the bad boy. And I think because I live that, I've always been attracted to it in books, but I write the good boy, like the sweet partner type thing. And my husband's always like jealous. But he became that. And I think that just being with somebody for so long and you see all these like little evolutions. There was this meme that, when you're with somebody long term, that you're attending the like 1,000 funerals of the person they once were. Like we're constantly evolving. And for me, that's really, it inspires a lot, because I feel like in a book, in a character arc, like we can never underestimate, like even in a realistic contemporary fiction, just how much a person can change over time and how one moment can change them over time. And I saw that so many times with just our relationship. And so there's lots of to pull from there.
Just to check in, we're about 5 minutes away from the ending, so we could probably do like one more question if we have that.
So since we do have some well-traveled authors here, would you recommend travel for inspiration?
Yeah, man, if I could give a gift to every kid in this country, it would be to send them to Europe or someplace else, South America, or someplace where they would experience other cultures other than their own, because you learn so much about this country when you go to other countries, and I would really, really like to send them all to like Dachau or one of the camps, to really get an experience that there's a atmosphere that hits you. So and like when you live in Europe, that's the history that they know. So they're not affected by it. But when you're an American and you go there, you are affected profoundly by that. So if I could give kids, just please, if you can, there are ways to travel fairly inexpensively, you know, and find them and go see something different, something new, and not just something American.
Yeah, and I think just as even taking the writer stuff out of it, travel has the potential to make you a better person, period, which in turn will probably make you a better writer, in the sense that it opens your eyes into places, into things that you didn't know existed. And like Ellen said, seeing a different country, even just those day-to-day moments. What is it like to wake up in, I went to Hikkaduwa, Sri Lanka to rebuild after the tsunami in 2004. Just to wake up and go to breakfast in a little town like Hikkaduwa on the southern coast of Sri Lanka. What does that look like? And so how does that then change me as a person? And then hopefully, how can I take that experience and infuse it somewhere into something that I write at some point in the future, right? And also, you know, yes, traveling is just a fun adventure, so people should do it anyway. But I think, you know, if you are lucky enough to have the opportunity, my God, yes, I totally agree. I wish every 15-year-old in this country was given a passport and an airline ticket and, like, you know, credits to a hostel somewhere, and said, like, go take a week, a month, whatever. That's why I think gap years are so amazing, and why I wish there was more of a culture of gap years here in America. And I've heard anecdotally that the pandemic has increased the amount of kids taking gap years, but I think that kind of experience, again, as a writer, any experience can help you become a better writer, and travel is probably the #1 way to do that.
And also train tickets, because like you can train anywhere in a lot of countries, or between a lot of countries, like you can't do here. And it's slow, and you can watch stuff, and you can learn, and you can write.
Yep.
So important. Traveling, like everyone said, I feel like it really impacts you as a person and as a writer. And I think that we would all benefit from the kind of just collective understanding that people live differently, and that is their normal, and that is like a beautiful thing. It's not something that we need to change, like to come in and change, which is, I feel like, something we've all witnessed, you know. And I actually used to host international writing retreats, and I'm going to start doing that again, because I feel like taking someone out of their normal day-to-day and putting them in a completely new experience, like, offers so much excitement and an inspiration for writing. I remember talking to Melissa Marr, and she said she'd always go on writing retreats because that would just give her the space. In other places, it would give her the space to just be and lean back and be inspired, and then have space to actually do the writing. But I think traveling a lot and even living elsewhere, I lived in Ecuador for a period of time. My sister, when she went to college, and this, I want it to be clear, like, finding inexpensive ways. Like, we came from an essentially impoverished family. And my mom would move, like, she moved us from Alaska to Hawaii with $30 in her pocket. And so, like, there are ways to find resources to do things, and it sometimes takes a lot of trust and sort of bold action. But my sister said, upon going into college, that she was going to go somewhere international every year. And I think she's now gone to, I think, 6 out of the 7 wonders of the world, and has been visited most continents. And it's by far the most valuable thing she's experienced in the last 5 years. And I think that finding a way to do that and knowing that it's important is beautiful.
Right. It also opens, when you go someplace new, as on the writing end, it just frees this kind of creative blockage that you get sometimes, because it is something new, and it's not, and you don't have the same, like, here worrying about phone calls, or, you know, checking your email, or your kids yelling at you, or whatever, you know. So, but even beyond all that, the idea of seeing how other people live in other spaces, it's so important. And also to know that we're not the only way to live, you know.
So awesome, guys. So now it's 2:45, so we're gonna wrap it up. I want to thank the authors again for being so awesome and wonderful and so eloquent. So you guys can just leave the Zoom and please go on to the next panels because we have some awesome other topics to discuss.
Thank you so much.
Much, everyone.